All right, we can call the meeting to order and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Steve, do you want to do roll call?
Dan.
All right.
Baskel,
Here.
Lynch,
Here.
Reese,
Here.
and here, and that's it. Your solicitors here, court reporters here, and I'm here representing Ian.
All right. So first up is application Z 2022-35, Thomas Pereira, 3111 Sawmill Road. The applicant is seeking variance relief from sections 172-29B subsection 1 and 172-29B subsection 8 to allow for street frontage less than 175 feet as well as a shared driveway. Applicant is also seeking a special exception to allow for a culvert replacement, shared driveway, and underground utilities within steep slopes in accordance with section 172-100.15. The applicant also requests relief from any other section of the zoning ordinance that may be realized during the zoning hearing process. Subject premises located in the R1 zoning district. And then who do we have here tonight on behalf of this application? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, before we get started, we get them sworn in then for anybody.
I did.
Do we want to get Mr. Pereira as well, just in case?
The chairman, can I put some things into evidence with respect to the record?
Yep.
On behalf of the township, we'd like to identify the application of the applicant accompanied by certain documents and exhibits. We would ask that that be made part of the record as township exhibit number 1. We have also provided a list of residents within 200 feet of the subject property, been notified of tonight's hearing. We'd like to mark that as township exhibit number 2. We have proof of publication of last month's scheduled hearing, which was continued on the record. We would ask that that be marked as township exhibit 3. Also, the notes of testimony from last month's meeting indicating that there was a motion and a request for continuance, which was adopted. And township exhibit number 4 is a picture of the posting of the actual property indicating the date and time of tonight's hearing. I would ask that they all be made part of the record on behalf of the township.
All right, admitted. And well, I guess we don't have to ask if there's anybody here who wishes to make public comment or party protesting. So skip that step. And so the file is in order, Mr. Neese.
It is.
All right. All right, floor is yours.
Thank you. May I remain seated or do you?
As long as your microphone's on.
Okay, I think it's probably better if I stay here. As I indicated, with me tonight is Mr. Pereira, who is the owner of the property at 3111 Sawmill Road. And David Damon, who is our project engineer, just to give you a little bit of background before we put Mr. Damon on. Property is approximately 11.9 plus or minus acres. As the chairman stated, it's in the R1 residential zoning district. Currently, the property consists of one lot with a single dwelling on it. Mr. Pereira proposes to subdivide the existing parcel into 3 new separate lots, raise the existing dwelling structure, and improve each of the new lots with a new residential dwelling. We intend to submit formal subdivision and land development plans for the project in the very near future. And we have had the benefit of a sketch plan review before the Township Planning Commission. And the zoning plan that is before you tonight, which the township has identified some areas that we needed relief from this board, is based on some of the comments that we've got back from the planning commission during the review. We believe the reception for the proposed development was favorable, and we're hope to proceed with the land development application after we are finished with the zoning process. Just to reiterate, the three items of relief that are requested from the board. One is a variance from section 172-29B1 to allow a street frontage of 72.62 feet in lieu of the 175 feet required for proposed lot 1. Lots 2 and 3 would meet the requirement, and we'll explain why we need that variance. Second is a variance from sections 172-29B and 172-131 to provide a shared driveway to serve proposed lots 1 and 2 in lieu of individual driveways. We believe the code allows for shared driveways, but in abundance of caution, we're asking for this relief. And finally, special exception from section 172-100.15 to allow a culvert replacement, shared driveway and underground utilities within the floodplain management district. And there are currently improvements in that area, and we seek to make them better, and we'll tell you about that. But because it is within the floodplain area, we need a special exception in order to do that work. And the code provides that a detailed engineering study shall accompany any application for special exception and must be approved by the Department of Environmental Resources, ultimately, Environmental Protection, I'm sorry. I'm dating myself there. And any other governmental agency having regulatory jurisdiction, and of course, we will apply for the appropriate permits should this relief be granted. I've handed up a packet with the exhibits that we will refer to, and the first two are just a copy of our application and a copy of the deed that was submitted with the application, which shows that Mr. Pereira is the owner of the property to establish standing. I'm not going to put on any testimony with those, but we ask that they be made part of the record. And again, Mr. Pereira is here and available to answer questions that the board may have, and we're happy to present him as a witness at the board's pleasure. However, as the relief requested is really engineering related, we intend to present Mr. Damon, the civil engineer, as our principal witness. And with that, I would like to call Mr. Damon, if I may. We're already sworn in, right?
Yeah.
At this point, I would normally go through Mr. Damon's qualifications, but I know that Mr. Damon has been accepted as an expert in civil engineering before this very board, and I'd ask that he be accorded that status for purposes of this hearing as well.
No problem.
Thank you. Mr. Damon, are you familiar with the Newtown Township zoning code and requirements?
I am.
And are you familiar with the property at 3111 Sawmill Road and the proposed subdivision development for the 3 lots with the new house?
Yes.
Are you the one that prepared the plans and the engineering studies with respect to the subdivision land development of this site?
I did.
As one of the items that was submitted with our application was an existing features plan. Is that correct?
That is.
We have a copy of that that you can refer to briefly.
Yes.
The board has a smaller version there, but they may have the full size version in their packet. Just wondered if you could just hit the highlights of that for the board.
I will. It might be beneficial just to refer to this word that's been rendered that I have up here, just because I highlighted some of the environmentally sensitive areas of the property. So the property fronts on Sawmill Road, and it's irregular in shape. It gets wider as you get further to the rear of the property. It's traversed by Thomas Run, cuts through the property. There's about property's 12 acres. There's about 7 acres that are on the rear portion of the property on the northeast side of Thomas Run, and about 5 acres in the front. Property also has a lot of wetlands that are just on the southwest side of Thomas Run. So they've been colored in green up here on this plan. And there's steep slope areas along Sawmill Road and then along the northeast side of Thomas Run, there's a very steep embankment. There's an existing driveway that enters the property and comes to a house that's located at this point. The driveway has an existing culvert that goes over Thomas Run. And it has two 36-inch pipes that make up the culvert.
And that culvert is the subject of one of our requests, right? The work that we're proposing to do with respect to that culvert, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So you also prepared a zoning plan, and this board in front of us is a copy of that zoning plan, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that shows the intended subdivision and configuration of the lot lines and all. Could you go through that a little bit for the board?
So the subdivision plan proposes 3 lots. The property's 12 acres. So these lots are all well in excess of the 60,000 square feet requirement under the R1 zone. 2 of the lots are on the rear portion of the property on the northeasterly side of Thomas Run, where the ground gets higher and is more suitable to building. And lot 1 is off of Sawmill Road. The 2 lots in the rear would use the existing driveway. It would be improved based on the recommendations we got from the fire marshal. The culvert would be replaced with a larger culvert. That would be one that would be larger, both in waterway openings, wider, and would be more structurally sufficient to allow emergency fire trucks to get back.
Now, this plan has, or the original version of this plan was submitted for sketch plan review. Is that correct?
Yes,
And during that sketch plan review, there was identified some suggestions as to really how to move things around a little bit maybe, and some relief we would need to do that. Is that correct?
yes,
And one of the items was with the configuration of the lots as shown, that the proposed lot 1 would not have 175 feet of street frontage as required in this district. Is that correct?
yes,
And we've requested a variance to allow street frontage of, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, 72.62 feet roughly,
yes, that's correct.
in lieu of the required 175 feet. Am I correct that the only street upon which this current overall parcel fronts is Sawmill Road, right?
That's correct.
There is no street access to any other portion of the property, is that right?
No,
And each of the 3 lots that is proposed will have to front on Sawmill Road then, obviously, right?
that's correct.
And lots 2 and 3, those lots 2 and 3 will have required 175 feet frontage, right?
Yes, they meet that requirement.
And each of these lots well exceeds the minimum lot area required for development in the R1 district, is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're not asking to reduce the size of lot 1 below ordinance requirements, only to reduce the street frontage, right?
Right.
And why is that necessary in order to build this plan?
The lot that fronts on Sawmill Road, lot 3 on the zoning plan. It represents several challenges to develop. So right now, there's a band of steep slopes off of Sawmill Road that limits entering the site on the easterly side, on the Radnor Township side, makes it difficult to build over there. Also a 24-inch culvert that discharges. And it cuts right across lot 3, running in a northeasterly direction. And it discharges to Thomas Run. It's also a large portion of floodplain. This line that has been marked in red here is the limit of the 100-year floodplain as shown on FEMA's mapping. And wetlands that are also located to the rear of lot 3. So when we did testing there to try and see for development, whether we could put stormwater management facilities on lot 3, we were limited to just places that were closer to the road. We have a high water table throughout that whole lot, so we can't put any stormwater management to the rear of the house. We have to put it to the sides of the house. And all these factors made that lot want to be wider than 175 feet. 175 feet, we just could not develop it to avoid the environmental problems we have there with the steep slopes, the ditch that discharges through the property, and then citing stormwater management facilities on the side yard areas, as opposed to where we would prefer to have them in the rear. We could narrow down the lot. So those engineering factors. Right now, we're right at the limit where we just have enough for 175 feet, 375-foot lots, but we couldn't make that lot work at that lot width to be developable.
So what we're proposing is a smaller lot entrance, so to speak, for lot 1. But is it true that lot 1 does have 175 feet frontage at what we call the building line? Is that right?
It's quite wide, so yes, it exceeds that. It's more than twice the size that it would be required to be based on zoning also.
And isn't it correct that elsewhere in the zoning ordinances where properties have a regular frontage such as cul-de-sacs, the code permits required frontage to be measured at the building line as opposed to the street line?
Yes,
I believe that's section 171-110. All right.
that's right.
And in your opinion, given the, irregular shape of parcel and the issues that you talked about in the proposed lot 3 area, is this, which narrows, the ability to access the lot 1 at Sawmill, is this sort of similar to like a cul-de-sac kind of deal with respect to that lot anyway?
It does reduce the width, and this is shaped similar to a lot that you would see on the cul-de-sac where it gets wider as you get to the building area.
Okay, Mr. Damon, you're familiar with the standards for variances that are in the Newtown Code and as well as the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code.
Yes,
I'm going to ask you in your capacity as an expert in civil engineering, if you have an opinion with respect to those standards with respect to the variance from section 172-29B1 to allow the frontage of less than 175 feet. First question, do you have an opinion as to whether there are unique physical circumstances or conditions, including irregularity, narrowness, or shallowness of the lot, size or shape, etc., and that are peculiar to this particular property, and then unnecessary hardship is due to such conditions and not the circumstances or conditions generally created by provisions of the chapter?
yes, this property has very many irregularities. Floodplain that is on either side of Thomas Run going through the property, the wetlands that really affect Sawmill Road side of the property, the steep slopes, irregular shape. Most of the buildable area is to the rear. We're on the other side of the stream. And the front lot is difficult to build on because of the high water table. drainage issues, floodplain issues, steep slope issues.
And all of those really go into the configuration of the lots as well as what type of street frontage they would be able to have. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you have an opinion as to whether, because of such physical circumstances that there's no possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the zoning code, or that the authorization of a variance is necessary to enable reasonable use of the property?
Yes, it would be very difficult to build on that front portion on a 175-foot wide lot.
And do you have an opinion as to whether this unnecessary hardship has been created by the applicant?
No, that it goes with the land.
If this variance, in your opinion, if this variance were authorized, do you believe it would alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the property is located?
No, I don't believe it would alter the essential character of the.
And do you have an opinion as to whether if this variance was granted, that it would authorize the minimum variance that would afford relief and represent the least modification possible?
Yes, I believe this would be the minimum variance that we require for this lot.
The second variance that you've requested is with respect to sections 172-29B8 and 172-131 to provide a shared driveway to serve proposed lots 1 and 2 and in lieu of individual driveways. Can you tell the board why a shared driveway is necessary in this case? And I'm assuming you're going to talk a little bit about the effect of Thomas Run and all that.
So the shared driveway
Yes,
provides a benefit in that it.
We're just, I don't want to be like rude because we're asking questions back here, but maybe this should be directed at you. The,
Sure.
From the southernmost portion of lot 3, you have that steep slope, a very steep slope shaded in orange. The way that the contour lines read on this indicate that it's sloped towards Thomas Run. Is that true?
Yes, this
Okay,
slopes,
so that slopes, so
this
there's,
slopes this way.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And the rear parts, they all slope towards
they
Thomas.
all
Run. That's
slope in
correct.
towards Thomas Run. Okay. That answers that.
The flow of the water, how is that going to affect the properties on the south side, right, or the north side?
I believe we're going
The
to.
above ones, folio one, if the
Yeah,
water's
we'll-
flowing, how,
We'll get,
you're gonna,
We're
tell
gonna
us how you're
get-
gonna control
we'll
that?
get to
The
that.
culvert repairs that their replacement and work that we want to do is really aimed at improving those situations.
Yeah, but
and-
is it, and again, I'm kind of new at this. The culverts are on the upside, right?
So yeah, so Thomas,
They run down.
yeah, Thomas Run right now is flowing towards Radnor, towards Darby Creek.
Okay,
So it is flowing in an easterly direction.
I guess what I'm asking, and I'm sure you're gonna show us this is the water control from the building these 3 lots. Will it affect any of the neighbors north or south of, and how you're gonna control that flow?
Right,
Okay,
we'll talk to that. That part goes into what we were discussing with lot 3, because the stormwater management is required based on the township ordinances, and so we do need to, that's why I'm asking that we need more width for that lot 3, one of the primary reasons.
so you'll conform to anything that the township manager says it needs to be done, the engineer?
Right.
Water safety.
Should this get approved, it goes through subdivision review, and part of that is, we've already done testing on that lot to see how we would cite stormwater management facilities, and we would agree to meet all those requirements of the town.
Thank you.
Back to the shared driveway for for a second. The proposed subdivision proposes reutilizing an existing driveway to access the proposed dwelling on each of the proposed lots 1 and 2, correct?
Yes.
And why is that done?
Well, it would allow the minimizing disturbance to the wetland areas. The floodplain varies in width from about 80 feet at the westerly side of the property, and it gets to about 260 feet as you go further downstream. So it widens out, and putting in a new driveway to serve lot 2, which is located in the northeast part of the lot, we'd have to go through a very wide floodplain area. We'd have to go through wetlands and then a steep slope that's located on the north side, and that steep slope varies from in height of about 15 to 20 feet. So it's a very steep embankment. So require, significant disturbance. It would affect the wetlands and the floodplain. So we look to the planning commission to see whether what we could do to utilize the existing driveway and just improve it. It would minimize the impact on the floodplain, the wetlands, and the steep slopes. And it's something we've done numerous times in a situation like this. In other areas where it's been approved, and fire marshal just requested that it be made 20 feet wide. So that they can adequately get back there with their equipment. And the applicant agreed to do that.
So this is really done in order to minimize disturbance of the wetland, the flood hazard areas, and the steep slopes. A method of doing that.
That's correct.
Am I correct that section 172-29B8 of the Newtown zoning code requires that no driveway be closer than 5 feet from any property line? And that's one of the reasons that a variance might be required in this case.
Well, it would cross the property line, so
Right.
yes.
And 172-131 was also identified in a zoning review as requiring a variance to allow the shared driveway. Is that correct?
Yes.
I would like to point out to the board, though, that 172-131 does appear to allow shared driveways. And it allows driveways or other means of circulation access to and from the street. Such space shall be readily accessed to and within a reasonable distance from the building served thereby, and shall be on the same lot as the main building or the lot adjacent thereto. So that would seem to allow this, but regardless, we're here asking for the variance, correct?
Yes.
And
And
also,
you asking for a variance or special except? Doesn't that
No,
provision
that's a
suggest
variance.
special exception?
The special exception. is
131?
with- The special exception is all to do with the culvert. And the floodplain issues.
Well, you're citing 131, opening paragraph suggests that driveways shall be on the same lot as the main buildings or lot adjacent thereto, except when authorized as special exception.
Well, we don't think we need a special exception because it is located on the lot
Okay.
or the lot adjacent
I
there
just-
too.
I just need you to be on the record with it.
I'd also like to point out that shared driveways are permitted in the township subdivision and land development ordinance, specifically section 148-9, which states a private means of vehicle access from a public or private street to a defining driveway, provided, however, that two contiguous lots may share a common driveway where the applicant requirements of the zoning chapter are met. We believe, one, that, common driveways should be permitted, but secondly, that, there's ample reason for a variance if they're not, because it enables us to minimize damage or disturbance to, environmentally sensitive areas. So again, I ask you, as I asked with respect to the previous variance request, do you feel that there are unique physical circumstances of the overall lot configuration and like the Thomas Run and all that necessitate the use of a shared driveway to access these two lots?
Yes, I do. And again, I point out that 5 acres and the developable, that's 5 acres of property are located 7 acres to the north of Thomas Run. And to get to those areas, we need to cross Thomas Run and also this cross wetlands and the steep slopes. Using the existing driveway allows us to avoid disturbing those areas and unnecessarily.
And with respect to the general criteria for variances, do you have an opinion as to whether this whether this constitutes unnecessary hardship?
Yes, and I don't believe it is a hardship that was created by anyone. By the applicant. It's there, it's part of the property.
Will this variance, if authorized, alter the essential character of the neighborhood or substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property? Or be detrimental to the public welfare?
No, it won't, and it eliminates a proposed driveway, which would be more impactful on the neighborhood.
And would this variance, if authorized, represent the minimum variance that would afford relief?
Yes,
Mr. Damon, the third item of relief that we were asking for, in addition to these two variances, is a special exception from section 172-100.15 to allow a culvert replacement, shared driveway, and underground utilities within the floodplain management district. Can you tell the board what work we're talking about that would require this special exception? What is part of the project this would be?
so it would be the area that is between the two blue lines within this floodplain management district. And it would be essentially replacing that culvert, repaving the driveway, and putting utilities to lot 1 and 2 within that driveway and either over or underneath the culvert.
When you say utilities, is this going to be septic and well, or is it public water, public sewer?
Public water and public sewer.
And the current existing driveway does cross Thomas Run with the culvert, right? And
Yes, in the same spot that we're utilizing.
it has twin 36-inch pipes currently.
It does.
And you had previously stated that the township fire marshal had requested that the existing driveway be widened from 15 to 20 feet.
Yes, that's correct.
And is that one of the reasons for the culvert work?
Well, it's also the fact, mainly the culverts are inadequate.
Right. But the new culvert is being designed for the purpose of one of the purposes to be able to handle a 20-foot road across, correct?
Yes, so it was made wider, so that is true.
This culvert crossing is located within the township flood hazard district, is that correct?
Yes,
And this is zone A of the FEMA flood insurance map, correct?
that's correct.
And am I correct that the culvert replacement project will require the permanent approval of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection?
It will require a DEP permit.
So we obviously would accept that as a condition of approval, and we wouldn't be able to do the work unless we got it anyway, right?
That's right.
Now, section 100-15B permits the following uses in the floodplain may be approved by special exception. I'm going to ask you if you agree that it says this. Roadways serving as corridor crossings, utility transmission lines, and culverts approved by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And all those provided that a detailed engineering study shall accompany any application for special exception must be approved by the Department of Environmental Protection. Is that a correct synopsis?
Yes, it is.
And those particular uses are what we're asking for in the floodplain district. Is that correct?
That's right.
And the reference to the study, have you done such a study?
Yes, I did.
And did we submit a copy of that study with our application to the zoning board?
Yes, we did.
And you have in your hand, I think, what I pre-marked is Exhibit A6 up there. And could you just tell the board what that study is and what it stands for or what it says? I guess.
But it's a hydrologic and hydraulic study of the portion of Thomas Run that is affected by this project. So it is a study where we looked at the drainage basin that's tributary to this point. It's 424 acres. We looked at the land uses. From that, we developed what the flows were during the various storms. And then we hydraulically analyzed what the existing culvert did and looked at what a proposed culvert replacement would do to that floodplain area and how it would improve it. And I can go further, but I don't know whether you want me to get into those determinations at this point.
Well, I think it would be helpful to just tell the board, as a result of that study, what were your findings that went into your design or your proposed design for the replacement culvert? In other words, what is the replacement culvert designed to correct or
Well, it was designed to reduce the flooding that's upstream of this point. So it is towards the upstream end of the property where that culvert is now, and it does create a backwater effect onto the adjacent properties, and that's something that we discussed with the neighbors. They discussed with Mr. Pereira, and we looked at putting in a box culvert that would enlarge that opening. It provides over 3 times the conveyance that the two twin pipes do, and it reduces that backwater effect on the neighboring properties substantially.
anything else from the study that went into your thinking of the design?
Well, there was a structural aspect and providing a safe crossing for emergency vehicles. Right now, the two pipes are very, they're not very structurally sufficient. And it's also a negative to have 2 pipes in a culvert crossing, because invariably one gets used more than the other starts to get clogged up, it develops debris. So you really, and it can come up with a situation where you're only one pipe is conveying the storm.
Will the proposed culvert replacement in any way alter the profile of Thomas Run?
No,
In your opinion, will it reduce floodplain elevation and lands upstream?
yes, so for storms such as a storm that happens once every 10 years, it reduces it by a foot 3 inches.
How about any effects downstream? Will there be any downstream adverse effects as a result of the proposed culvert?
No,
And you indicated that utilities will be run through this area as well?
yes, it'll be electric, all the utilities are underground, electric, sewer and water and communication.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, you've indicated that you're familiar with the Newtown ordinance, Newtown Township ordinance. Are you familiar with the standards for special exceptions in the Newtown ordinance?
Yes,
Do you have an opinion as to whether the culvert replacement, shared driveway and underground utilities within the floodplain management district meets the standards for special exception under the code?
I believe they do.
You believe that what's proposed is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this chapter?
Yes,
I'm going to go through the specific standards and ask you if you have any opinion, and if you do, if you wish to expound on why, please do. Does this application fall within the provisions of the chapter which accord the applicant the right to seek a special exception? It's
yes,
an obvious answer, yes, because section 172, 115, or 100-15 does. Is do you, in your opinion, is the use not prejudicial to the character of the immediate vicinity and will not have a detrimental effect on neighboring properties?
no, it should improve flooding conditions.
Your opinion, do you have an opinion as to whether the use is suitable for the property in question? And whether it's designed, constructed, and operated and maintained to be in harmony with and appropriate with the appearance and existing or intended character of the immediate vicinity?
Yes, it will.
You have an opinion as to whether water, sewage, stormwater drainage, fire, and police protection are provided for this use?
Yes, it will. Improve those provisions.
As a matter of fact, it's designed to better allow emergency vehicles and also to carry the water and sewer, et cetera, right?
Safer, yes.
Yes. Do you have an opinion as to whether the use is physically suitable for this site and that there are not topographical, soil, geological, drainage, or environmental factors which would cause this proposed development to adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the neighboring property?
Yeah, that this particular location, we're choosing to avoid additional disturbance.
The code also provides that especially with respect to uses that are requested in the floodplain district such as this, that the board is to consider in determining whether allowance of a special exception is contrary to the public interest. The zoning board is to consider if the application, if granted, will do any of the following. I'm going to ask you in your capacity as a professional engineer, do you have any concerns that this would adversely affect any of these? Would the granting of the special exception, in your opinion, substantially increase traffic congestion on streets to a high degree of probability that will adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the community?
No, it's much less dense than what could be built there.
Also, do you have an opinion as to whether this would increase the danger of fire or panic or otherwise endanger the public safety?
Yeah, it won't do like.
I believe you just answered this with your last answer, but would this application, in your opinion, overcrowd the land or create an undue congestion of population?
No, it will not.
Would it impair stormwater management or cause soil erosion?
No, it will not.
Improve it, actually. Yes. Would it be consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood?
Yes, it's replacing it.
Be detrimental to other properties in the area?
No, it should improve.
Affect the character of the immediate neighborhood by failing to conserve the values of existing buildings and to encourage the most appropriate use of the land?
No, it won't.
Adversely affect the community development objectives in the
No.
code? Adversely affect off-street parking?
No, it will not.
Substantially burden water, sewers, groundwater, schools, parks, or other public facilities?
No, it won't.
In your opinion, would this otherwise adversely affect public health, safety, and welfare of the community in general?
No.
There's actually some other provisions that the board is to take a look at. And I'm going to ask you, under section 172, 100.17, the code provides the zoning board is required to consider a request for special exception for provisions of the flood hazard district. Board shall, to the extent permitted by law, considering the following factors where appropriate to be established by the applicant. So I'm going to ask you, in your opinion, again, as a professional engineer, does the culvert replacement project as proposed present any concerns with respect to any of the following? Does this cause any danger to life or property due to increased flood heights or velocities caused by encroachments?
Now, it will reduce the flood heights.
Does this increase the danger that materials may be swept onto other lands or downstream to the injury of others?
Now, this would reduce the possibility.
The proposed water supply and sanitation systems and the ability of these systems to avoid causing disease, contamination, unsanitary conditions?
Now, it will not improperly have that.
I feel as though you've answered this question several times, but would this project adversely affect the susceptibility of proposed use to flood damage and effect of such damage on the owner?
Now, it will reduce that possibility.
Are there any available alternative locations that were not subject to flooding that could be used for this proposed use?
No, because we would need to cross Thomas Road.
Regardless, right? Again, the compatibility of the proposed use with existing foreseeable uses.
Yes, it's compatible.
Whether this is compatible, the compatibility of the proposed use with existing and foreseeable uses.
Yes, it would be compatible.
Any effect on the safety of access to the property in times of flood for ordinary and emergency vehicles?
Now, this would reduce that impact of flooding.
How about the effect of this on the expected height, velocity, duration, rise, and sediment transport of flood water expected at the site?
This would reduce height of the floodwaters and also sediment transport.
I have no further questions for Mr. Damon, but would certainly offer him to the board for any questions that the board might have.
I have a question.
Please.
Question about parking. I'm looking at the lot one. How many cars can you get in there? Because even at the bottom end of the scoop, it looks like it's pretty much in the topo, which is really severe. So how many cars? I mean, it's a long walk from Sawmill where you shouldn't be parking to begin with. Should not be parking. Up to the property, and it's a 20-foot wide, so you're not parking cars in the driveway going up. So how many cars are you?
Well, that's something that typically we did discuss. So there's different things that can be done with that. So it'll be a 2 or 3 car garage, but then there can be stabilized areas alongside that portion of the driveway that's close to the house for guests to park along that long driveway. Is probably the best way to handle that. So that typically what I would see in a situation like this.
That's something that we would typically be working out during the land development phase. This.
Yeah, it does not really affect really appearance. That's my answer.
Yeah, everything that you've specified and everything that's in your application, everything that's in your expert summary findings seems to, and not seems to, but will improve water issues in that area, correct?
Yeah, this it's 12 acres. Someone could have come in here and built a cul-de-sac.
That's,
Wouldn't be looking for relief.
that's what I'm
We have to
thinking.
have the frontages on.
We have a quality builder coming in, building few houses on a lot. And the, you know, the slope is based on the terrain, everything is away from Sawmill Road. Right, so the water's flowing away from it. Culvert's gonna solve the Thomas Run issue.
And yeah, then it flows a short distance to Darby Creek, so it really doesn't affect, and that's a park area downstream,
Yeah.
so. Wouldn't affect anybody even if there was issues from the development.
I don't know how you're gonna run public sewer 500 feet, but
Yeah, it would
good
have,
luck with the municipal authority.
it would be grinder pumps that would have to connect to sewer and sawmill.
And Steve, are there any concerns from the
yeah.
township on this? I know normally with Andy here, I always ask, get his input.
Yeah, I think that you've addressed them all. I would make note in your packet, Andy had put in just the section of code 172.29, 172, 131. And I believe the other section that was in question, and I can't remember what that was right now. Just so that you would have those, if you had a question about referring back to the actual there. The one thing that, you know, I think you make the comment regarding, you know, you could put in the cul-de-sac, and you talked about that. If you're going to issue this, you might just say, based on that you would restrict all future to these 3 lots, and I'm assuming that the applicant would be willing to do so. So that it's listed.
No further subdivision.
No further subdivision. I can't speak for that, but you know, if you're avoiding putting in the cul-de-sac now.
I guess the only exception was there's neighbors that may be interested in some ground where they had an encroachment, so small subdivisions that were non-building lots, maybe.
I think the township's more concerned on more building than we are, you know. The
So
other,
can we
but
put that on there with no
I don't,
additional?
I mean,
building?
I would look at what the applicant is willing to
Well, I
do
feel
as
like
well.
based on the testimony, there was nowhere else to build on this, right? I mean, you're talking about the acreage that's being used being the best possible scenario to build on, right?
But the lots are all well oversized,
Yeah,
double what's required. So I just know that a neighbor did contact Tom to see whether he could buy some ground, and that, you know, that's the only thing I would put as far as. Yeah, that's not.
I think what that would not, I would assume doesn't change the number of lots between the neighbor and yourself. Is that a fair statement? Or are you looking at adding an additional building lot?
It wouldn't be a building lot now, it would just be a 4th lot that then would be conveyed to the neighbor, so.
They just want the ground.
Was on the property.
Well, can we restrict it to a non-buildable lot?
Yeah, I'm thinking if
Yes.
you did it as a non-buildable lot.
Right.
I think it's just, you know, you say you could do a cul-de-sac. I'm saying you don't, I hear you saying you don't want to do the cul-de-sac. I think there's a benefit to the township, not to the benefit, but in doing so, if you restrict it that these are the 3 lots other than maybe the non-buildable lot, then I think you've addressed the only other solution that we've talked about is that you'd have to put in a cul-de-sac, and this way you keep from having to do so. And I think it's the benefit is that we reduce the amount of impervious coverage. I mean, I think there's a lot of wins doing the way you're doing it, and the township wants to support that. It just, we don't want to come back and say, yes, we've done this, and now you have 3 more driveways off of this lot at some point in the future, and you know, that you say it's a shared driveway.
Can we put that in their deed as a restriction?
Well,
No.
not the deed, we could put it in as if you should choose to favor the application, that is a condition and a safeguard of the approval, you can put that condition on. I was going to ask the applicant if they would agree to that condition. Also, you stipulated in your testimony to a condition with regard to the DEP approvals. I assume that.
Well, that's actually a requirement of the ordinance.
I understand that, but just as a factor in the approval process, this board could put that condition on. Also, with regard to the 20-foot wide, is that the minimum width of this
Driveway, yes.
driveway? And would you, I know you've spoken to it, would you agree to a condition to ensure that it's structurally sound for fire protection equipment, regardless of what the culvert is or the width, that it be structurally sound to withstand those kinds of equipment as they get larger as time goes?
Yes,
That would be acceptable. And I wanted to ask, it might be premature, it may be a land development issue really, but you got a common driveway. Is it intended to be by virtue of an easement or some sort of agreement between property owners with respect to maintenance of that?
yes,
Particular
and
driveway?
I'm certain that'll be a requirement of subdivision. They'll want to review that, solicitor will have to review that, but yes, it would be an easy.
Do you have any problems with if there's a favorable decision that be a condition, that there be some easement or mutuality agreement with regard to maintenance and
Yeah.
that road, since it goes over that culvert?
Yes, I'm certain that that'll be.
Is that an
something we can
acceptable
do,
condition?
yes.
I just did.
All the things that Sam just said.
And how, if they agree to sell any additional land, any land and be subdivided, how do we protect that 5 years from now that somebody doesn't come and buy and build a house on it? How can we?
Well, it has to be, if it's not a buildable lot, in terms of the subdivision, they have to get township approval for any kind of subdivision with regard to that in land development, if they were going to do that. And then the zoning restriction would come as part of that condition, so that may be a barrier.
That would really be a lot line change anyway on that,
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah,
Not,
but you'd have to come, they'd have to come
To
in
take-
for.
Okay,
township
so
approval.
it would show up on the zoning records, so they wouldn't be able. Right, but it's really gonna come up under the new person's subdivision.
I think that's the same for all of these, right? They're all gonna be sold. So if the new property owner decides to do something new on the property, they'll have to go through the same process.
Yeah, but
And they decided to build, they would have to start over. And, they wanted to build another, say the, 137 square foot lot with R1 is 60. Good, but they would have to get approval on it.
they'd have to,
Yeah, but if they
they'd have to come with a new application.
Yeah, it'd be a new application, but if they were going to acquire some additional property, you could do a reverse subdivision and make that small parcel, which is non-buildable, part of the existing other property. But again, all of that has to come through township for approval process. So it doesn't go undiscovered. Can't do something that doesn't come to the attention of the township.
Or did we land on this then for what we're gonna do if, are we saying that you're not gonna be able to subdivide and build on this? Is that something we're putting in if we're going to move
Well,
forward? with the
we're
approval here?
going to put in a condition of approval, should you vote to approve, that there be no further subdivision of the property for billable purposes.
Well, yeah, and when we started that, I saw a side conversation, so what was,
I had the impression that,
that's what I'm curious, what the feedback is there. It didn't seem,
And I guess the eternity of it is a bit of a concern, but the eternity of that. I would feel better, I think, if the condition said, without additional township approval, because say the the wetland status or whatever changed because of climate change or whatever.
I don't think that's.
And, I would hate to see a person be able to be precluded to come back for the board and present a case why an additional lot might be. But again, it would have to be, they'd have to come and state their case before you. in order to do it.
Current R1 zoning, you know.
Well, I think that that's probably a condition that would have to be done, but from lawyering standpoint, I understand his point. That he's just suggesting that, that there be no subdivision unless the township approves it at some
Yeah,
given
because
date.
otherwise
And
they would come in.
circumstances should change.
We don't have the authority to do that. To permanently, forever and eternity inhibit subdivision.
What you're saying, man.
Well, I think you could put that condition in. Yeah, but
But what's the Commonwealth Court say? I mean,
well, that would depend on what they do.
Yeah.
But I think that it could be challenged at some later date.
Yeah.
But I think that in either instance, they're going to have, if they're going to subdivide any property, they're going to have to come under the MPC and under our township code, they're going to have to come back here.
Will be argued.
Yeah, I personally think we should keep it in or put it in. If they, in the future, the new owners come in front of us, come in front of the board again, they're gonna need a variance to get it changed. So all this is gonna do is instigate a variance, just like everything else. You know, there's nothing's forever. At least not until you stop looking at the green side of grass.
That's, yeah.
You know, it's all we're doing is we're saying, if you make a change, it's not going to be just walk in and do it. It's going to have to be, everything has to be looked at again about water control and everything else. But
One thing
without putting it in there, you don't necessarily have to do that. That's the way.
But if they're gonna
Well,
subdivide the lot, they're gonna be
that-
back in here anyway, right? So going through
Wait.
this, so that's why I'm confused about us having to put some contingency on here now.
Brady, you can't re-subdivide, you could never subdivide this without coming back for zoning approval because you know, it
Well,
would be
that's
less
what I
frontage,
just
it would
said,
be
yeah.
less everything, so you definitely would need zoning relief to do a subsequent
I
subdivision.
think we're all saying the same thing here. I
Right,
think
but-
as the,
But I think that putting it in suggests not so much to this applicant, but somebody who may
The
be
next guy up.
looking to acquire it. So that puts them on notice that they have to go through this process.
yeah, I guess I'm just struggling with just saying it's not buildable, but again, I feel like that's exactly what's gonna happen, right? If I own that lot, I subdivide it and I want to build on it, I'm gonna be back here, right? No matter what.
Well, they're obviously going to have some issues building on areas of this particular
Right.
lot because of the ground itself.
Which they would do. I just feel like us saying that right now, it's like, how do we throw another roadblock out there to make it more difficult in the future? It's the only part I'm struggling with.
Well, you know, what
So
occurs to me is,
You know, conditions are up to you.
No, I know. I'm trying to just get input from all sides here for it, I guess. Again, like you said, if it's gonna be sold and subdivided, you'll be back here anyway. Going through this process that we would have to decide then if that's gonna be allowed or not. Hopefully I won't be on the board.
Well, it may be zoning, it also may, if it's compliant for zoning, then it may just merely be township land development and subdivision. It may be just subdivision and land development.
it's always possible that the zoning district could change.
It would have to, otherwise. you'd be back.
The other possibility is, you know, that this property backs up to, is that Palmer's? Paper mill, I'm sorry. He does not have access, but in the event that they did have access, that would seem to be an opportunity in the back there. If that ever came about, and I hate to see that before.
more or
I'm
less.
also like planning to move into one of the lots. My intention of the 3 houses and like not building a cul-de-sac is because I'm trying to preserve the land, and, you know, raise my children there. So, you know, I think if down the road, if something was to happen, if I was a builder just building to sell these lots, I would agree, you know, to that, but I'm planning to live in one of these lots.
So we can put in that you're never allowed to not live there.
Exactly.
That's really the next guy, not.
Yeah,
I know, it's.
I think
He's
the
actually
concern
living
is
in
the
the
next
farmhouse
person, not
currently.
so much
I'm
you.
living in my current farmhouse on the property. I'm living on that land. On the property, I want to stay there forever.
we want to take a minute?
You can take a minute.
Let's do that
Go
real
into
quick.
executive session.
Step out. All right.
You want to keep
One being step. We do that or not, you know what I mean? It is point.
So after further review, it was a catch. Was it Devontae Smith?
You don't need to put that down. That was off the record there. I think everybody's comfortable with that.
New York doesn't know what they're doing.
We said after further review, it was a catch.
Full time. Okay, so I make a motion to approve application Z 2022-35 for the variance from section 172-29 subsection Bravo 1 and 172-29 subsection Bravo 8 for the street frontage less than 175 feet, as well as a shared driveway. Also recommend approval for, or make a motion to approve the special exception to allow the culvert to be replaced, a shared driveway and underground utilities within steep slopes in accordance with section 172-100.15. And any other relief from the zoning ordinances that are realized during this process with the following conditions. That no further subdivision for building purposes be proceed without township approval. That DEP approval, as testified, is granted. That a minimum width of a 20-foot driveway be present throughout the project. And that the culvert be structurally sound for fire apparatus, given their excessive weight.
Right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Um,
all right,
Kevin, why don't we do a roll call vote?
that's fine, so all those in favor and just state your name, we'll go down the
Charlie Falcone, yes.
Mike Lynch, yes.
Kevin Baskel, yes.
Ed Verzes, yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Appreciate your time. and effort. Thank you.